Hey, how's it?
Good. How's it going?
Pretty good. You have some sort of beeping in the background for a second.
Yeah, it's off now. Do you hear any background noise for the engine or anything right now?
Nope, you just sound a little bit quieter than normal.
Okay, awesome. We'll just stick with that then because my headphones are at home.
Okay. Yeah, you sound pretty good.
Okay, cool. So, sorry I missed that. Anyone who's listening to the recording or anyone who's listening live right now, totally my fault. I screwed up. That was my bad stuff. Yeah, my bad.
That's okay. You'll make up for it.
That's right. We're gonna have a great discussion today. We're gonna have a dang good show.
Right.
Can totally play on that.
Oh, yeah.
Today we're talking about the effects of the BLM riots, what they've done. The effect on the Black community, which I'm hoping for a lot of feedback here because we are obviously me and Spencer are not Black, so there's a knowledge that we can never possess. So definitely looking forward to see. Hopefully, anyone who's listening, please, if you're listening recorded, then get into our shows so we can listen to you guys live and hear what you have to say. Because me and Spencer don't know everything in the whole world, but we appreciate live feedback. We appreciate a show going with each other.
Yeah. So that's basically what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about the basic effects of the BLM riots and whether they were a societal good or not. In the end, did they bring more good or more harm around from them?
Exactly, yeah. And this is a really hot button topic right now. You have people who are pro BLM who think that anybody who's against what they did, or they say there's any kind of negative effects, they label them as racists. I've actually been messaged on Instagram a couple times by various different people, which delete those conversations. Messaged by people who claim that because of my anti-BLM views that I am a racist. And real quick going on right there, I think me and Spencer hold a lot of the same view right here with this, is that anti BLM does not mean anti-Black people. Anti-BLM means anti-Black organization, Black Lives Matter organization.
Right. I am against BLM, all capitalized, as an organization. Of course, as a decent human being, I think that all people that are Black matter, right? And just like all white people and all Asians and all every type of group there is. But the organization itself is founded and designed in such a way that it is detrimental to everyone, including people that it says it supports, and it's founded off of Marxist thinking, and it's a terrible way to run any sort of organization.
Exactly. It's BLM as an organization is infused, like, to its very core with socialist, extremist, and communist extremist ideas and ideology, and it is just call it like the delivery system for trying to bring communism to the United States on a grander scale. That's a lot faster, and that acts under the guise of social justice. Because in the right mind, right? Let's just look at this from what everyone else is, when everyone, the normal person, is really thinking. Nobody is anti, or nobody is like, or I can't say nobody. Speaking in generalizations, nobody is like anti support people who are oppressed, right? If you see someone getting beat down in the street, you're not going to sit there and cheer the person beating the person on, right? Good for you, right. Good job beating them in the face. Like, that doesn't happen. So yeah, when we talk about BLM, we're talking about me and Spencer, like, we are pro social justice, but we're not SJW people, because that really orientates with kind of a leftist point of view, lots of communist kind of views, and communism has done nothing good for the country ever. So, those are just the facts of the matter.
Yeah, and you have a lot of people have seen this clip. You have the leaders of BLM, the organization, saying that we are trained Marxists. They're not even trying to be subtle about this. They're open and out there talking about their ideology, and that ideology has never brought about any good. You can go back to our episode talking about capitalism, where we kind of delved into that, talking about why socialism is bad. And when you're running an organization that is trying to change the culture of America, you don't want an organization that is Marxist and is going to bring about, or wants to bring about, changes that are fundamentally anti-American.
Absolutely, yeah. Something that's really important to note about the Black Lives Matter movement, and speaking more to the effects of that, and not some of the reality of the organization itself. I wanted to take a couple days here, so between the gap that we've had since our last show and this show, I spent a lot of time looking up people who recounted what they feel about Black Lives Matter, how it has really helped them, whether they were actually in the riots, because I've read some accounts of people who were in the riots who their hindsight is now 2020, and they're like, actually, I don't think that it did that much for me, or I don't think it did that much for a social justice movement. And the reality is that it's difficult to work for a social justice movement and have positive effects when it was rotten to the core at the beginning. Like at the beginning of BLM, when they had with the riot, well, BLM's been around for a while, but in the beginning of the riots and everything, when attention really started getting drawn to them, there was the mission, what's our mission or something like that statement that they had listed on their website, and it said in there to dismantle the nuclear family and bring rights for LGBTQ people. There was actually very little mention of helping Black people or anyone from racism or anything like that. It was mostly just focused on this idea of dismantling the Western nuclear family. I mean, the family is at the core of everything. Destruction of the family is destruction of the world.
Yeah, it's a complete reversion and perversion of the way society works. Reading actually from their mission statement, they say that they want to disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and quote unquote villages that collectively care for one another. And that word collective and villages, that definitely, you can see where that Marxism and communism is coming in. And that's, even if I agreed with everything else that BLM as an organization were doing, this is where I would absolutely disagree, just because the nuclear family is prescribed by God and by society. It is the most fundamental building block of society. And when you get rid of it, then you're able to push whatever you want, because the fundamental unit of society has been weakened at that point.
Yeah, and going to speak to some of the causes, or not some of the causes, some of the effects of the BLM organization, and especially the riots. Because we've been really talking about some like what it stands for, what the BLM organization is so far today, for the past few minutes here. But talking about the effects of it, anyone really think that they had some of the feelings that they had about Black Lives Matter before this organization? Like, if someone saw a Black Lives Matter thing before this, they would have been like, oh, I don't know what that is, or they might have looked it up or just dismissed it altogether. And now, I don't know about anyone else, but I see a Black Lives Matter logo and I'm keeping an eye on that person, right? If I'm out in public and I see a person who's wearing all kinds of, BLM merch and stuff like that, and they're obviously public about their opinions and an organization that has such demonic, really, I mean, maybe that's a too harsh a word, but the reality where we have to use harsh language. Using soft words doesn't bring realization or understanding. So, and BLM as an organization, but not saying Black Lives Matter, BLM organization represents something demonic to me, because the dismantling of, if we're looking at this from a Christian perspective, the dismantling of the nuclear family is like Satan's
Terrible.
goal, right? Yeah, it's terrible. It's in a realistic, even from an atheist point of view, you could look at that and say, I don't see any good benefits coming from it, right? Like you have, think about how much of the percentage of the population, especially in high populated cities, has issues with single parents, and then also has issues with things like crime. You know, when you don't have a family and a support structure to help a child grow up like how they're supposed to with a mother and a father, then you expose that child to whatever, right? You're not really teaching them right from wrong, even though I'm not saying single mothers or single fathers cannot do a good job, because there are absolutely wonderful, stellar examples of them who have done amazing jobs teaching their children despite all odds. But in a realistic point of view, the general group of people who are single parents, their kids have side effects from not being raised in a good family. And so dismantling the nuclear family, that's just bad. There's no good coming from that, period.
Well, and they're not only talking about just, it's fine to have single mothers or single fathers or whatever. They are specifically saying, and we're going to replace it with community parents, a village mentality, which is, this kind of goes back to the communism thing. It never works. And the family is where you can tell your kids morals and tell them, this is how the world works. Whereas if you get rid of that, then they can come in and fill their heads instead with, well, here's what we want you to believe. And it's kind of amazing because feel free to go to their site. I know they've edited it since they got some backlash, but their charter, their beliefs, they say that the organization was founded 4 years ago. And all I can think is 4 years ago is a long time. How come we haven't heard anything about them until now, right? Maybe there was some about during the last election, but when there were no presidential elections going on, no one heard about them or knew about them. Why is it only now that they're stirring up trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ties into a lot of what we're going to talk about next episode. We're talking about some of the causes, some of the reasons behind BLM and how it came to be what it is now, especially what it was last year, which I would say is probably at what it was at its height, or at least its current height. But and going on furthermore with some of the things that that BLM supports. They're very strong, and they talk a lot about anyone who wants to. Real quick, let me just put this in here. Anyone who wants to or questions what I'm saying here about what their charter was, the original charter, which obviously is what they still believe, message me on Instagram. I have it linked here on my stereo, and I will send anyone who wants them screenshots of their old mission statement. Because in reality, it hasn't changed that much. They talked a lot about more rights for LGBTQ people, which kind of ties in with what we talked about recently about the Equality Act. That has no good repercussions. So anyone who wants to hear what I have to say about that, go back and listen to that, because we don't have time to cover that whole thing. That's pretty expansive. But and one other thing that besides being just working a lot for trans rights or LGBTQ, they're also pro-abortion, and it says so right in their charter. Actually, it says so extensively on their charter, and I see abortion as a crime, and I think we can do an episode on that later, Spencer. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
but that's really, abortion is. Anyone who wants to say, maybe a child isn't really a person until the third trimester, or I've seen doctors who believe that a child isn't fully developed until 2 years old, so that's not technically a human life until after they turn two. And I just find that vile and offensive in the sight of everything in the world. I mean, there's nothing okay about that at all. And this is an organization that supports every single radical left ideology all in one big bundle. They're just they support all of them right down the line. They look at the world from a view of systemic racism. They look at it from the oppression of gender and sexuality. They look at it from LG from the abortion, pro-life versus pro-choice. And it's really, I see some of the things for like with the radical left, commonly identifies with. I see those as just reincarnations of good versus evil, and a lot of this stuff is just bad. So yeah,
Well,
have your comments on that, and then we have a comment after that.
yeah, so we'll play this after, but in there, they are very obviously a pro-abortion organization, right? They hold a lot of far-left views, but in their belief statement, they even say that we are guided by the fact that all Black lives matter, and then they list a bunch of, we don't care if you're religious, what sexual identity, if you're trans, They list a ton of stuff that they say they don't care about. We still believe that you matter no matter which group you identify with. And all it makes me think is, okay, what about the thousands and thousands and thousands of aborted Black babies every year that are killed and murdered, right? Do they not matter? Do only some Black lives matter? Because I thought they were saying that all Black lives matter, but apparently it's only some, because some, if they're an inconvenience, they don't mind getting rid of. So they have a lot of contradictions within their organization itself, and it's disgusting that they support that.
Yeah, and I mean, even further than that, you see people like, forget the name of the cop. There was a cop who was a Black cop who was murdered in a BLM riot by rioters, and the BLM publicly came out and they were like, well, we don't support him because he wasn't, whatever their reason was, right? But he was a Black person. He was a cop, so he was facing prejudice from people who believed that cops should be killed or defunded or whatever like that. So he was facing that kind of
David Dorn.
Yeah, exactly. So he was. Oh, thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah. So I mean, that's a pretty serious thing, and no one cared about him because he didn't go along with their script, with their ideology. If you're different from us, then you don't support us, and we don't support you, and that is just fundamentally not okay. Because if you're gonna say, like it says in their charter, we support everybody. We are pro LGBTQ, choice, life, yada yada yada. We are pro everything. Well, then you better act pro everything, but they don't.
Yeah, and as much as they say that they want to put the line on someone's skin color and say, as long as you're Black, then we support you. It's really an ideological line that they put. They say, well, David Dorn, right? He was a police officer, which is the group that they were protesting and rioting against. And, he's a good guy. He led a good family. And because of that, he didn't fit their picture. And so they just swept his murder under the rug.
Yeah, and they dismissed it or called against it, saying it was deserved even by some people I heard, which is just horrible. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't believe that the BLM organization has had any positive effects. And if anyone wants to refute that, please leave a comment. We do have one comment today.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and play that, and then we can keep going.
What's interesting is, so in Minneapolis, I live near there, where the riots happened. It led to $900 million in property damage. But anyways, it led to them defunding the police, which is interesting because now the case for George Floyd, they needed new police, or they needed more police officers. So the mayor had to ask other cities for police officers to cover in because there were overtime was being reached. So it's just interesting how it's on face value, that city council, but yet they have to borrow cops now. So It's just at face value. It's always about face value. It's nothing about actual core values. It's just what makes you feel good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's exactly what we're talking about today. The effects that came from the BLM riots, and Minneapolis is a great example, and you got a lot of other cities across the U.S. that, in one degree or another, tried to follow their example, tried to eliminate the police departments or cut them down or replace them with quote unquote social workers. And in every case, there's actually a very funny graphic that shows the headlines of the Minneapolis Police Department. It says, calls for Minneapolis police to be defunded. Then it goes to they were defunded. And then it goes to crime spiked by hundreds of percentage points. Oh, crap. Let's reinstate the police. And that's one of the effects of the riots, is that people get to see firsthand, when you get rid of the police, when you get rid of an active part of administrating justice, criminals are going to do whatever they want. It doesn't matter if they're black, white, Asian. Any criminals are going to increase their activity when they know they have a lower chance of getting caught. And that came directly from the BLM riots. There is nothing else that you can directly attribute that to.
Yeah, and that's completely true. I mean, I look at things and try to say, I try not to look at things, especially because after BLM, everyone's really painted this picture where everything needs to be looked at under the prism of race, right? You need to look at it, everything through the glasses of race. Why is this person doing that? Oh, are they white? Okay, that's why. Why is this person doing that? Oh, they're black. Okay, that's why. And I've really strive to overcome that, because that's a popular stigmatism that's going around, especially with me and Spencer's generation right now. They all just got sucked in like sheeple and started following everything that everyone else said. And so you got a lot of people who are just following this ideology and don't really know the reality, but then they're looking at everything through this lens and they're making things worse, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I never even, like, if I was walking down the street or anything and there was a black guy who walked next to me who was dressed, okay, I'm a country guy, right? And he was dressed a country guy. I would have been like, "Hey, country man," and I might have said hi. I might have not said anything. I wouldn't even have noticed his skin color. But tell me if anyone else thinks differently. Because of BLM, I walk down the street or I'm in a store now and I look at someone, and yes, skin color is something that comes to mind, and then I have to consciously override that stigmatism that has been created by not white people, not black people. This has been created by BLM organization, by leftist communists.
Yeah, it came from an ideology. It wasn't the inherent difference between black and white people or Asians or anyone is literally skin deep, right? The only difference is that my skin is a slightly different tone than someone else's, right? There are genetic differences, and in terms of culture, there's cultural differences. But what BLM was saying is that because of that skin deep difference, right? We don't care about your character or your beliefs or your culture or anything. We only care that your skin is a different color than someone else's.
That's
And
Biden's what was it? If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Like, what the heck?
yeah.
Every black subscribe to his ideology and needs to vote for him. That is racist, if you ask me.
Well, and on top of that, it's saying, listen, I think that you should vote one way because of your skin color. Like, that's the same as saying, if you don't vote Republican, you ain't white. It's ridiculous. I can be white and vote for Republicans, or I can be white and vote for Democrats. My skin color has literally nothing to do with it, unless one group is actively and apparently discriminating against my skin color. There's no reason to vote along a specific ideology. Just because I have a certain skin color doesn't mean I'm going to vote a certain ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And everyone, leave comments, guys. Leave comments, because me and Spencer, we can sit here and preach to you guys we can sit here and preach to you guys, but in reality, we want you guys to respond and say what you have, say what you think. What do you think the effects of the BLM was? You know, what have they done? What have they not done? What have they made worse? If they have made anything better, let me know. Because, you know, I don't know everything. Me and Spencer, we don't know everything. But that's why we do this, because one, we want to learn more, and two, we want to express our opinions and create a conversation from them.
Yeah.
So me and Spencer believe that the effects of BLM, maybe I'm speaking too much, but me and Spencer believe that the effects of BLM were negative. I have not been able to find any positive effects, except for obviously making some black people actually very angry by these portrayals against them, that all black people are members of BLM or leftists or things like that. You know, like conservative twins got really popular. Those guys are awesome.
Oh yeah. And you have
no
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
You have a lot of black people, and a lot of I mean, I'm sure some white liberals as well, that are going and looking and saying, wait a second, there's one party that obviously very deeply cares about my skin color, and then there's this other party, the Republican Party, which says, live and let live. I don't care what color your skin is, as long as you're a good person. And so I think an inadvertent effect of the riots is that some people were actually woken up to the fact that, wait a second, maybe these people don't have my best interests in mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And they were so extreme that, and then they started presenting these follow us, or or we're gonna outlier you, or we're gonna ostracize you from everyone else. And people were actually turned off by that. They were like, actually, wait a second, we want to have our own opinions. Just because what you say doesn't mean that's what we say. And that's something I believe is another negative of Black Lives Matter, is that they presented to the whole world really this opinion where all black people agree with us, and they're all oppressed, and white people are oppressors. All white people, yada yada yada. U.S. is systemically racist, stuff like this. And in reality, I can't find evidence to back up any of these things. The U.S. is not systemically racist. Not all black people believe an ideology. Not even a majority, I would say. I don't know exactly where the numbers lie, because there's several different studies, but some of them are biased. I haven't found any unbiased yet, so I'm still working on compiling numbers. But I mean, like, I can't. There's a lot more than speaking in absolutes, especially when it's such a large part of population of the world. It's black, white, yellow, neon skin does not just create your ideology, does not create your beliefs, right? If you're a Christian, and you're black, then you can't. Then when someone says, you know, we believe in transgender stuff like that, Christians inherently believe, you know, they aren't anti-gay people, but they're more pro things like you know, the pro marriage between a man and woman, stuff like that. So by creating another stigmatism like that, they just further ostracize people. So I mean, to lump people into one broad category is bad, and so that's why I think the BLM movement was overall bad, because it didn't do anything for anybody. It created a lot of generalizations, even though they called against generalizations. It created a lot of stigmatism, even though they called against it, and it actually created a lot of fear. Even I would say, I mean, like people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or Philadelphia, or St. Louis, or Seattle, individuals who weren't interested in the violence, they weren't interested in protesting. I mean, their businesses were burned to the ground. Their houses were, you know, lit on fire. Their part of the city in Seattle was taken over twice. That's just ridiculous. Like, how can you look at that and go, "Oh yes, this is a positive movement," when in reality, you know, people say, you know, maybe this is a little bit too conspiracy for some people, but people say that there's systemic racism in the U.S., or that there is, you know, there's solid racism happening, and there may be instances of one individual who's racist or something like that. But I would say that the majority of some of the issues that the Black community faces. And I actually have had Black people who message me on Instagram or talk to me or watch videos from them or whatever, who have said that one of the biggest problems that the Black community faces is actually stigmatism created by things like Hollywood. I mean, when you think of, like, let's just say, for example, New Orleans, guy with a gun in a gang. Maybe some people may not agree with me, but I would say that the majority of people would look at that and think, maybe not realizing that the person that comes to mind is a Black person. Hollywood has created that. The majority of Black people are not gang members. Absolutely not. Many Black people are really just great people who have, some of them who may even have no interest in these dumb racist things that are going around where people are saying, oh, it's about race, and they're just like, I just want to live my life and be an American, right?
Well,
When you go ahead,
and when you talk more and more about race, if I talk about race and race and race and race, and this happened to Black people, this happened to Asians, this happened to this group, that group, the more you talk about it, the more people pay attention, right? Before, each year, as I've heard various false cries of racism from people on the left, and especially with these BLM riots, I against my will, have become more and more aware of the fact that people are different races. Beforehand, I honestly could I I barely paid attention to it because a person was a person, and to me, they still are. But the left wants people to be divided into groups and wants um, Black people to be defined by their skin color into a specific group, an ideological group, any type of group like that. And the the results of these BLM riots is more racism because people, when they look at this and they say, "Oh my gosh, right? Why rioting is terrible? Why are people rioting?" And then they look and they see the name Black Lives Matter is attached to a riot, which is destroying property and leading to the injury and death of many people. And you have people who look and say, well, oh my gosh, if this is, now I'm not, me personally, this is not me saying this, but this is a situation that could very much happen where someone says, whoa, this is what Black people do when when they think something wrong has been done with them. And then you're going to get an entire generation. Stephen Crowder has been talking about this. You're going to get a generation that has grown up with this and thinks that this is what, quote unquote, what Black people do when something bad is done to them. And that's just not the case. It's a select few extremists, but these extremists have made it look like the mainstream Black people do this when they don't. And so other people of other groups are going to go, whoa, I don't want to deal with that type of person.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk too much about racism, but just like the cold hard facts of the Black Lives Matter organization is that I don't see any positive benefits came from it. It hasn't decreased what is already incredibly small amount of population in this country who, when I say small, I mean insanely small compared to our overall population of people who might be racist. It hasn't given more rights to an LGBTQ community, and which, I mean, they already have every group in this country, every minority, majority, whatever it is, they all have equal rights under the Constitution and under state laws. Everybody has equal rights. What people say when they say, like, okay, we need more trans rights, what they want is more protections for transgender people against maybe stigmatisms or things like that. For instance, trans people being able to compete in women's sports. That's the thing going on right now. That's just an ideology that the left is pushing, not necessarily BLM though. A trans man, right, could literally be like Dwayne Johnson, right? And he could walk up to someone in school and say, you know what, I identify as a female, and they could say, okay, you can compete in whatever women's sports you want, and he's obviously going to win, right? Biologically, men have more strength and more strength and endurance than women, and so that's just another good example. They haven't created any better circumstance because there wasn't a better circumstance to be created. We already have a nation where everyone is equal, which everyone's facing right now. Any instance of perceived racism or perceived prejudice against one person or another is actually created, I would say, more so by the very groups that work against it, right? Like you have like the LGBTQ movement, right, where they got this crap with like the you have to support LGBTQ people or you have to be pro-gay, otherwise you are homophobic. Or BLM, if you don't support our organization, then you are racist. You're a white supremacist, crap like that. And people just say, well, I don't want to be a white supremacist, so I got to be a part of BLM. And in reality, they haven't done anything better. They just force people out of a factor of fear or not wanting to be ostracized from society or thinking that they did something bad. They've made people think one way or another, right? Like saying someone's a white supremacist when in reality they definitely aren't doesn't help society. That just creates fear and actually makes things worse. I can't think of any real tangible evidence, or if anyone has any evidence, please say something and prove me wrong, because I would love to be proven wrong, but I cannot think of anything good that Black Lives Matter has done for any minority or the country as a whole.
Yeah,
That's where I stand.
And please feel free to add your comments. Whether you mostly agree with us or whether you only slightly agree with us. And any instance of real racism in America is generally on an individual level. And on top of that, if it is an instance of real racism where someone says, I will not serve you because you're black, or various other things, then that instance of racism is outside of the system that we have in place, and then the system corrects for it, right? If I refuse to serve a black person at my restaurant, then not only is that outside of the system because the system says unless I have a legitimate reason I must serve them, but it's I will also have to face the backlash from that because the black person can sue me for not serving them because they were black, and then the American judicial system has done its job in that case, and it has helped settle the score and helped the person who was discriminated against. Whereas these people they're just fighting against a ghost basically, because those instances are so few and far between that they're almost they are statistically zero. And it makes you wonder. BLM, their charter says that they are a global network. If they were a global network, why don't they fight for black rights in countries where black people are still being enslaved today, right? There are countries in Africa, and I don't know about other parts of the world, but I know in Africa where slavery is still a thing and people still get enslaved, black and white. And if they want to make a real difference in the world, especially for black people, if they don't care which nationality you are, which anything, if they truly want to help black people, then they should be going to those countries and fighting to end not racism, fighting to end slavery there, because that is a much worse evil than fake perceived racism here in America.
Absolutely, but there's no racism in America. This is an international organization that truly stands for helping black people or helping the minorities that they preach about. Well, then they should go to other countries where these minorities are actually oppressed in reality. So then it becomes a question of motive. Like why, if they are staying here in America and they're creating such a stir here in America, what does it actually do for them? Is it just brand recognition? They're just getting recognized all over the world because they're stirring up stuff in America and they're creating trouble in this great country so they get recognized, or is there a kind of deeper thing going on? To me, I think that with the leaders being Marxist and a lot of their ideology being communist, that I think BLM serves, at least in the U.S., no other purpose than to bring communism to this country, and put it under the guise of social justice, right? Because who in their right mind wants to look at it and say, oh, this is a group, because I'm not saying they don't know anything about it, right? They look at it and they say, Black Lives Matter. Well, that's not true. Most people aren't going to be like that. That's nuts, right? Most people are like, oh, Black Lives Matter. Okay, that sounds good. And then when they actually research it, they see things like people running through a city, burning it down, destroying people's businesses. And they're like, wait a second. This said Black Lives Matter. This doesn't look like justice. This looks like organized crime.
Yeah, this looks like chaos.
Yeah, this is like country destroying kind of stuff, and that's maybe too far. But I want everyone to think about, anyone who's listening to recording or live, think about it for a second. When you have any instance in history when you have massive groups of millions of people who to agree and associate with groups who are actively violent and do things like riots, right? Because there are hundreds and thousands of people in a lot of these riots, like in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or Seattle, Washington, or St. Louis, Missouri. There are thousands of people in these riots that are going through and burning stuff. When you have swaths of population who agrees and believes that destroys a country, right? So you look at that, and I just look at it and realize that there's a reality here that's further than what is perceived by everyone else, and that's not talked about in the news. That some people will look at it and say, "Oh, well, you're just a conspiracy theorist," when in reality, this isn't conspiracy. This is analyzing. This is analyzing a situation and creating, judging what you think is going to happen, what the effects of this are going to be, and looking at history and saying, okay, what has happened in the past similar to this, and what have the effects been? Oh, entire countries were destroyed. Good to know. So this is actually not going to help us.
Yeah. All right. Let's take this message.
I think you are like living in an alternative reality. There's no BLM riots. Like, I'm just saying.
We're talking about last year, if you're thinking about right now. But if you're going to say that there are no BLM riots that ever happened, that would be unequivocally false. So leave another comment for what you are saying about that, whether you think there's no riots happening now. And that's what we're talking about, because yes, there are no riots happening now. And we'll be talking about that, I guess, kind of in the next episode, because there's a reason why no riots are happening now. It's because all the funding went away.
Yep. And all of the consequence went away, right? The presidency was won. And so there's no reason. So they all went home. As for technical terms, a riot is defined as a violent disturbance of the peace by a crowd. And that's not all, obviously, not all, but a lot of the protests that went on over the summer turned into riots. And there's just no way around that. There were, millions of dollars in property damage, and people were actually killed and murdered. And those things are all horrible, and those things all fit in exactly with the definition of a riot.
Yeah, and actually the number is somewhere in like the 8 billion range last I saw. I mean, like, well, I think it was who said, someone was on here earlier said Minneapolis was like 800 million. Yeah, 800 million in Minneapolis wasn't even a mainstream. Like Portland, Oregon, or Kenosha, Wisconsin, where they attacked and blew up that car dealership and that guy's street corner shop. I mean, these are instances of real destruction that these BLM riots do, yes, absolutely classify as riot, to the point that I would actually say some of them even classify as domestic terrorism. And some people might say, oh, that's too far, you're being a racist, but that's really true. And let's look at this from some people. I've heard the thing that only 8% of the BLM riots could be actually considered violent. And I don't count organizations or groups of people that gather in like 10 or less than 100 and just stand there and talk for a little while and then disperse, I don't really consider that a protest, which is statistically, yes, what a considerable portion of the other BLM riots were. Small groups that were then quickly dispersed or never had any momentum at all. You know, you're not talking like there was just a couple of riots out of these like hundreds of thousands of people. There's just a couple of them that turned violent. No, the majority of them, in terms of individuals and body count, were violent, yes, and a majority of them were not peaceful. They were violent, and small groups of that could be considered in part of this 92% of Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful, but they were very smallly populated. For instance, I know in a town in the Midwest, in what states that's in Indiana, they had a protest in one of the towns, and cops quickly came in and dispersed it. I mean, the whole thing lasted like, I think it was 20 minutes, and there was, I think it was just over 100 people that were there, and then it was done. That's not really a protest. So that's different, but that goes part towards the statistics, which is why some of the reasons why people, when we look at the effects of the BLM riots, it's difficult to accurately judge what the reality is, what like what the statistical differences are, what have they actually done, because there's a lot of bias in the statistics, because you have people who are super BLM, you have people who are super anti BLM, people who are more middle line, and there's bias in everything, right? People don't really know what to say about this or that, or they do know what to say and they're creating a false narrative. That's a basic reality that you can find. I mean, with instances like with CNN, which is quote unquote a trusted news source, which is very biased. Even Fox News say it's trusted. Fox News is biased. Whether or not it's biased to the right or more so to the left now is up for debate, because it's kind of shifting a little bit. But I would say it's majority conservative. But there's bias in everything. So looking at statistics, you need to look at raw data, and a lot of the people who have actually done research on this are not people presenting raw data. And there are people like CNN who are saying, "Oh no, most of the BLM riots were peaceful, or there wasn't that much property damage at all, or this is a righteous thing that needs to happen. This is something that needs to happen in our country because the U.S. is systemically racist," and then their facts don't really back it up because the statistics are skewed. They're skewed with bias, and they're skewed with false information.
Yeah, and you can even take statistics. There's actually a very good video on YouTube that talks about how easy it is to lie with statistics. And you can take statistics and say, well, a majority of BLM protests were peaceful. If you look at the number of protests over the number of protests that turned into riots over the number of protests, sure, then you could say that a majority of them were peaceful, because a majority of them were also very small, maybe in rural towns, or rural Midwestern states like you were talking about, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, that sort of area. But as soon as you go out more towards the coast, California, New York, or you get to the big cities like Atlanta and various other places, Minneapolis, you're gonna find that a lot of damage was done. And if you take the statistic of, instead of putting the number of riots over the total number of protests, if you put the number of people at each one, the gap becomes a lot smaller, because those protests that turned into riots were very big in some instances, and regardless, they caused a lot of property damage, and people lost lives because of them. So yeah, the effects of the BLM riots were terrible all around. The peaceful ones were protests, right? There were peaceful protests for BLM, but they were generally smaller crowds or in smaller areas. The bigger ones that got the news, even while CNN was trying to say this is a fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Those are what got the news, and maybe they shouldn't have in terms of number of protests, but in terms of their effect and what they did, they really changed how people were thinking, and they changed a lot of things. They caused a lot of damage, and the effects of the BLM riots, nothing good came out of them. And you guys can add comments if you think that there was something good that came out of the riots specifically, but there's nothing there that I can think of that is a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I just looked up online some of the people, the body count of the Kenosha, Wisconsin riots, because I think those were some of the most violent, especially in terms of the mainstream coverage and all the stuff that happened. There were several deaths, a lot of arrests on both sides of the aisle for people in terms of whether they were counter protesters or they were the rioters in the first place. And it says there was over at one point. I'm sorry, that background noise. There was over at one point over 75,000 people in the riots.
Wow.
That was an estimated. That's NPR. That was an estimated. So that's a really, really big number. So looking at these groups of smaller people compared to a group of 75,000 plus people, I mean, that's not even a comparison. That's like a little pebble compared to Mount Everest. I mean, seriously. So when people look at this, they need to judge this more in terms of statistics, because reality, there's a lot smaller group of people who were actually protesting, who were actually peaceful, versus the amount of people who were actively violent. And I must say, though, I with some of the violence, it's kind of a grain of salt, because if you watch, anyone who's watched some of the videos of what it was like before the riots, because like when people were gathering together and stuff like that, there's a lot of people that, I mean, they had like tables of food and people who were just sitting there talking, and then you would have people who would give speeches, and there'd be like someone who said something, and then someone would come up and be very angry and aggravated, and they would up to anger, and everyone started screaming and yelling, and then someone else would come in who was not as outspoken or angry or violent, and then and then another person would come in and be angry and violent, and then it just kept coming and coming. So some of these people in the riots. That's why I don't blame the individuals. I blame the organization, because some of these individuals were just led on with a mob mentality or riled up to anger, when in reality they might not have ever done this. So I think that BLM removed the willpower of some people, because individuals who maybe even participate in it, but they might have been outspoken about it in other ways. They just didn't want to seem like they were racist. They didn't want to seem like they were part of that group of people who might be considered racist because they were anti-BLM. They wanted to stay mainstream. They didn't want to be controversial or anything like that. And in this modern world, I'd say everyone really needs to be a little bit controversial, because either you're left, and I would say most people are either really left, or you're right, and in some cases you're really right. Really to the right. And that varies from time to time, but one overlying theme with a lot of this current world that we all live in today is extreme opinions. You have people who, especially on the left, who are definitely much more outspoken and represent a lot of the mainstream media, who present very progressive and very leftist ideas, sometimes borderlining on very communist ideas. Things like socialized healthcare, or or even just the dismantling like the nuclear family. I even heard. So if anyone who doesn't know about the Equality Act, go back and listen to me and Spencer's. We did a show on that. What was that, a couple days ago now?
Yeah.
And talked about it. And in this act, it sets the precedent for things like puberty blockers being mandatory for children at the age of 9. That is a proposed succession to this act. It's called the Equality Act. Go look it up online. It's not. I mean, this isn't me being. What is the word? It's not me being
facetious.
Yeah. This is just, it's online. It's right there in your face. You can see people who have actually said that this was what they want to do after this bill goes through. And I don't think that some of these things would have happened without BLM creating a mindset that all minorities are oppressed. Women are oppressed. LGBTQ people are oppressed. Anyone who's not white is oppressed. Things like this. When you look at everything from minority versus majority, race versus race, I'm sorry, not race versus anything, race or gender or sexuality or ideology, when you look at every single individual in this whole world through that lens, you're going to see a lot of negativity, because the people who are outspoken on either sides are normally more so extreme, especially on the left. You have people who are very extreme on the left, who represent the entirety of the mainstream from the left. We got people like Don Lemon or Nancy Pelosi or AOC, and then the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement and the BLM organization itself. I mean, there's just strong opinions are required to combat dire circumstances, and so that's one of the reasons that me and Spencer have this podcast, because our words may not be the prettiest to hear for some people. Some people, I've been called a racist. I've been called a bigot. I've been told I should go to HE double hockey sticks. I've been told that I should kill myself. I've been threatened. My life has been threatened by people on Instagram mainly. And these are because I'm disrupting some of the left disrupted the kind of normal ebb and flow that we had, and now that they've created actual real bad consequences. You have people who, like me and Spencer here, are trying to push back against this and get us back into an equilibrium. And I think that BLM did nothing to help anybody but disrupt the equilibrium and actually create consequences like we've talked about already, where they've created this lens of oppression through everything, and they've worked against the perception of minorities. Like me and Spencer have said, due to BLM. I want to know if anyone else feels this way. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just too involved looking at BLM. Maybe I watched too many of the videos and the footage from it. I saw too much violence. But when you have an organization that sits here and says Black Lives Matter, and they just keep pushing this ideology of black, racism. When I see people who are Black in public or online or things, there's a stigma that BLM created that I consistently now every day work to overcome, because I don't personally have this stigma, but because of BLM, it has been exposed to me and became ingrained, right? Like when you see, in terms of human instinct, if you see someone, or you do it to yourself, like let's say you accidentally stab yourself with a knife or cut yourself, right? You're gonna be a little more cautious around knives before. Like me personally, I actually cut my finger off in the door. That's an interesting story.
You could say that.
For a little while afterwards, I was cautious of doors. So when I see people who are burning down businesses and killing people and beating people up, sometimes for no reason at all, actually commonly for no reason at all, then I look at anyone who has a BLM sign, or people who are being propped up, as in saying, Black people, in terms of looking at them and I go, okay, I'm a little cautious here because I don't really know I don't know where they line up. I don't know what they think. And so I see BLM, I know exactly what they think. But because of BLM, I have this stigma that I work to overcome. And I think Spencer, we both experienced some of the same things here. But if anyone else feels like that, let me know. We do have a comment, so maybe that's someone saying they do.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and play that. We do have to get going relatively soon. And we did start a bit later, but we've still got some good discussion going, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep up the comments, guys.
Gentlemen, good evening. Like always, enjoying your show, and you always bring the facts. You just don't talk, blah, blah, blah. You actually present facts. and I enjoy it.
Thank you.
Well,
That's one of the reasons we've actually moved to Wednesday and Saturday shows, because me and Spencer are both still in school. So we're going to be bringing a lot more straight facts and statistics and looking at the raw data, so we can have things to back up some of our shows. Like with the BLM, I personally, I don't know how Spencer fared with this, but we did a lot of research, trying to have things to back up our show today, little, handbook of evidence, so to say. And I find that there is all little to no raw data out there to make analogies and to be able to look at the actual information. But there is an obscene amount of bias on both sides, like we've already talked about, that actually has just made, I would say, some of the effects of the BLM worse, because people are looking at this and they're like, well, there was violence and people burned down cities, and now the mainstream media is covering it up, and now I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know who to trust. And is this reliable? Is Fox News reliable? Is CNN reliable? Is any of this information credible? Or is it just a bunch of, quote unquote, anonymous sources? There's the meme. I'm not sure if anyone's seen it, but it's kind of popular, where in high school or college, you have to have, 10 different sources with citations from each one of them. Whereas in journalism, in mainstream journalism, you just need one source that says anonymous source, and then boom, your source is now credible.
Yep. And actually, I have a journalism teacher, and we've talked about this, and he knows and thinks that it's ridiculous that they have that sort of thing, and they have so much bias put into their publications. Our newspaper tries to be unbiased, except for in our bias section where we say, okay, this is where we're giving you our opinion mixed with fact. And that's definitely what this show is. We are opinion mixed with fact, but we're putting the fact first and then extrapolating our opinions and beliefs from it. We're not putting our opinion and then seeking out and cherry picking facts that agree with our opinion. We're taking the facts and then deriving an opinion from them. So that was actually, yeah. So for everyone that's listening, we are changing our schedule a little bit. We're going to be doing 2 shows a week, about halfway through the week, and on Saturday, just to bring the best content to you guys. That way there's more research and more time put into each episode, and you guys are able to get more for the time you put in listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a little off topic here, but I'm making the analogy. If someone were to use a sentence, hey, come over here and help me screw this in. Yeah, you. I say that's a sentence they said, right? In the modern journalism, you have people who will go, they just say 2 words from that whole sentence, and it's screw you. And then they're like, look what they just said. I can't believe they said that. Everyone get angry that they said that, when in reality they said, actually, can you come here and help me out? Yeah, you. This is a reality that's being portrayed, and it's very pertinent to the consequences of the BLM riots, because what they portrayed was inequality, violence. What they portrayed was inequality and oppression, and that people were violent against the minorities, and that so they need to be violent back. That's what they portrayed, but they only took snippets from everything, right? When they look at data from, for instance, cops, fatal shootings from cops to citizens, right? They looked at data like that, and they would say, well, cops just are oppressive. They kill Black people all the time. When in reality, the majority of the time that a cop is left with the choice of life and death, and they end up killing another person, is actually cop against a white person, or whether it's whatever ethnicity the cop is or race the cop is, it's usually against white people. They saw the Black people number in there, and so they said, oh, look, there you go. Cops are violent purposely against Black people. Or they see that there is any more than none
race people who are racist in the U.S. and so they say, oh, this U.S. is systemically racist because they don't hurt these people or get rid of them. When in the United States, as some people may find, maybe you're uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable with that, well, then leave because these are people's rights. People are allowed to have the opinion of racism, right? Let's say anyone has the opinion that, I don't know, white people are superior to Asians or black people are superior to Hispanics, right? Anybody can have this opinion, right? When this opinion transforms into a violation of another person's rights, then they can get in trouble. Anyone is allowed to have their own thoughts and say what they want until it infringes upon someone else's rights. And that's just not okay with some people, especially the BLM. And so we've created this thing, which is, I would say, probably almost a direct effect of the BLM, where people have said, oh, well, you don't agree with what I say, or you don't like how I feel. Oh, well, I'm just going to scream hatred at you. And in some instances, there's actually people who have screamed hatred in forms of death threats. For instance, look up death threats against Drew Hernandez. He was a conservative reporter, private reporter. Look up against anyone like Ben Shapiro, who is it? Steven Crowder.
There you
so
go.
many different people who are like they disrupt and they're against what some other people, especially people on the left, have said. And so what they just bring it down to is, oh, well, we're going to silence you or we're going to try and hurt you. And that is unequivocally not okay. That is not the culture that I want America to continue to build upon. But that is an effect of BLM, and that is something that our current presidency is building upon. They are building upon the repression of the Constitution for the creature comforts of people. If you don't like that someone said that you are an idiot, then walk away from them. And if you don't like that someone offends you personally or disagrees with you, walk away from them, ignore them, don't talk to them ever again, yada, yada, yada. If it's really so severe that you need to say things like, I want to hurt this person, or I need to go burn this person's business down, then you need to take a second, cool off, and, not be an idiot.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you had a lot of good points in there. And again, I just can't state it enough. There is nothing that I can think of, even if I try really hard, there is nothing good that came out of these riots. Nothing. And in fact, it very potentially made things worse for Black people, because now they're going to have a bunch of people, like I was talking about earlier, who look at them and say, whoa, okay, I have to tread lightly around this person or else I might get fired or I might get canceled or this or that. And unfortunately, and as unfortunate as it is, that can completely backfire on Black people. And instead of BLM helping Black people, it's going to put a lot of those people in a situation where they suddenly have these people treating them very not necessarily kind, but just tenderly. They're not sure what they should do, and right, no one likes it when they're treading lightly around you. It gives you the feeling like you're a bomb about to go off, and BLM has only made it seem like that's the case for Black people, when generally it is not, except for the people in the BLM riots. That is not the case for the majority of any race. The majority of most people of any race are just nice people who want to get along, and the BLM riots has set it up so that now people are more apprehensive about those sort of situations.
Absolutely, yeah. And I would say that historically, there are many groups who are minorities that speak louder than the majority, and sometimes to the detriment. Now, maybe not necessarily to the detriment in this instance, but in the instance of women's rights. I'm not sure if anyone knows this, but the majority of women who were adults and of voting age and things like this, during the civil rights movement for women, they were actually against the movement, simply because they did not want to be part of the draft. In order to be, the reason that men got the right to vote is that we were required to be registered for the draft. So a lot of women, the majority of women who lived in the U.S. during the time of the civil rights movement, were actually not a fan of it because they didn't want to be part of the draft. Now
Right.
it actually
Obviously
turned out,
changed.
yeah, it actually turned out that women, obviously they got rights to vote, and which are actually absolutely great. But then they were given a proviso which said that you are not do not force to be registered for the draft. So, that's just something to keep in mind, that the majority does not always act to the wishes of the majority. Sometimes to the betterment, but I would say at this point in time, since everyone in the U.S. has equal rights, there's no more that they can do for it. You really want to create a better environment for Black people? How about you go protest Hollywood? Go tell them to stop making movies that center around Black gangs and stuff like this, and portray people who are Black as gang members and crap like that. Like, who wants to be portrayed as that? I don't want all white people to be portrayed as racist. That's absolutely not what I want. But when people focus on it, and it's what people see all the time, like they do with Hollywood, TV, movies, crap like this, then that's what they think, right? Like when you think, I don't know, downtown, like more of a slummy area in a Democrat-run city like New Orleans or whatever, gang guy. Anyone who's understands what I'm saying will understand what I'm saying. Those people that wear their pants down clear to the middle of their thighs, and you just look at them and you're like, dude, how do your pants stay on your body and that low? Hollywood has portrayed this as a style and made it look like it's why do that? Like, why put the film of race in it, right? So if people want to really create better situations for Black people, go protest the things that are actually causing problems and stop following a sheep organization that doesn't actually have any evidence to back up its claims. There is not systemic racism in the United States. There is not vast oppression of Black people. There is not specific cop against Black people violence. There is not there's not there's not a large portion of white people who are racist. White people are not all bad. Absolutely not. Even actually, I would say absolutely to the vast majority. These are basic facts that people have skewed. They look at small details, like I mentioned earlier, with the there are some instances of police, being a verifiably small percentage compared to the overall amount of deaths from police action, that they saw, there's a Black, this is a Black person that got killed by cops, so cops are racist. Not true, but that's what they see. And looking at through the spectrum of race and oppression, then they just follow along with that. And so, this is a natural consequence. When you look at things from this kind of stuff, then you create stigmas. When you create fear, when you go and burn someone's house down, or blow up their business, blow up their house, burn down their business. And anyone who thinks blowing up their house is wrong, in Kenosha there was actually instances where rioters would walk through neighborhoods and launch Black Widow fireworks, which are the really big ones. I think they're the biggest that you can use without a permit.
Yep.
And they would launch these into people's houses while they were sleeping or while they were awake. Didn't matter. They didn't know no one was in the houses, but they were launching these things. There were people who were going in with lighters and lighting curtains on fire. Nothing good came from BLM. Prove me wrong. You got a comment. You want to listen to that?
Change my mind. Yeah. So we'll probably end about 5, and then we can listen to this comment, and then we'll see where we go from there, and then kind of give our last thoughts.
Yeah, about 8 minutes left, guys.
I just gotta say, this show was great. Shout out to Colson and Spencer. Very informative. I just want to say, keep it up.
Hey, thank you so much, man. That's what we worked for.
Yeah, thanks. That's exactly what we try to do. We try to inform ourselves so that we can better inform you. And I know through my research and even just talking about it now, I learned some more about the BLM riots that I didn't know before. I thought I had known quite a bit of it, but there was definitely room to learn more.
Yeah, and we can learn even more, guys, by talking about it, right? There's the phrase "democracy dies in darkness," and that's one of the reasons me and Spencer have this, because we don't want to sit here like we could if we were to get us a podcast on Spotify or places like this, where we sit here and preach to you guys, or even if we were just only on YouTube and not on here. We don't want to sit here and preach to you guys all day. We want to talk to you guys. We want to have a conversation, because otherwise you can easily just say, oh, well, I don't agree with what they're saying, and I don't want to talk about that, so we're going to turn that off. And to people who agree with us, maybe it'd be different for you. You would listen or something like that. And we very much so appreciate comments from both sides, whether you agree with us or disagree with us, because that's how people come to conclusions. Maybe I can change your mind. Maybe you can change my mind. Maybe someone could could find something and say that this was a positive result of BLM riots or BLM organization, period. And I could go, oh, okay, I didn't know that before. Thank you for telling me that. I would, yes, say that is a positive thing. No one's done that for me, so I currently have the opinion, and all my data has backed up that nothing BLM has done has left positive effects. So that's why we do this live format, because otherwise, like I said, me and Spencer are just going to sit here and preach at everybody. And I don't know about you, but with all of the other different podcasts who have people that sit there and say what they want, and then you just sit there and watch it, I want to have a conversation. And that's that's the reason me and Spencer made this. We want to create a stir. We want to talk about things and present our opinions with facts. We want people to present their opinions with facts and come together in a discussion, a debate that in the end results in better things. If you, in the end of any of our episodes, someone is angry at us or they don't agree with us, that's fine. That's part of conversation. You're not always going to agree with someone, even if you provide what you think might be evidence to the contrary of their beliefs. So we're not going to say that everyone who listens to our show needs to all of a sudden be a conservative, because that's not reality. We've actually had a couple people on here who didn't exactly listen to everything we were saying and then just drew conclusions too fast. I remember that one guy, I think it was on our first or second episode, he came on when we were talking about the BLM organization, not the riot specifically, just the organization, and he thought we were racist, so he immediately turned it off. It was funny because I actually listened to his show later, and he was very conservative.
Really?
Yeah, he was very conservative. He just didn't listen. And so listening and creating a dialogue, creating a conversation is what draws change. People who just are allowed to, but when you just fester with your own opinions and you only look at information provided from people who are like-minded to you, then you're going to get biased. You're going to get things that are wrong. You need to that's why me and Spencer, we both look at like CNN, even though CNN is junk. They have information from the left who people say that, and then they use for say their things, and so we have to look at everything, right? I watch Steven Crowder, but I also watch CNN. I watch Fox News, which is, I guess that's really kind of neutral right now, because they're kind of left, but they're also kind of right.
Yeah.
But, these are important things that are part of being a citizen in the United States of America. Now, not everybody is super involved in the news. It's totally understandable. I think that's one thing that me and Spencer work to do here is we aren't a news organization. We're a podcast. And so we're not as, I would say tone deaf, because we listen and you guys listen to us and we create this conversation. So, yeah. And I really love today's episode. Thank you guys for, being a part of it. I don't think, from what I've heard so far, I don't think anyone really has anything that goes against that BLM has a positive effect. So as far as I know, I would say that, yeah, BLM does not have positive effects.
Yeah. And just for my last thoughts here, in the research that I did for this, I think you did do more research than me, Colson, but I did a lot of my research a couple months ago, and reading through the BLM charter and their what we believe stuff, And you can judge a man and you can judge an organization by their actions. And if you look at an organization like charities or whatever, and you see, okay, this charity says it's a charity, and I can look and it donated 100% or 98% of its donations to helping build houses for poor people, or for helping people get jobs, or for glasses and clothes for the poor, or whatever. You can look at an organization and say, it says it's a charity, and what it's doing is obviously charitable. Therefore, I know it's a good organization and I can support it. But there are charities out there which do basically nothing with their money, but pay people to sit around acting like they're doing something. And you know that they are charity in name only. And that is exactly what BLM is. BLM is an organization that says Black Lives Matter in name only. It is an organization that has done nothing, especially with these riots. It has done nothing to help Black people. It has done nothing to help society in general. It it brought about no societal good, and the effects of it have been so terrible. Right, we've talked about the property damage, but that's just a small part of it. The race relations and everything that has come out of this, there has been nothing good, and there have been so many things that have been bad that it's hard to think that this is like I was talking about, a true charity. It is only an organization that says Black Lives Matter by its name. By its actions, it says that Black lives don't matter. The only thing that matters to it is changing how society works and raising money for themselves. So the BLM riots brought about nothing good as far as I could tell. If you guys think differently, feel free to come on to our next show where we'll be talking about some specific instances with the BLM riots. That will be this coming Saturday. And also feel free to check out the podcast on YouTube if the stereo isn't working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we got a message for break here. We can go ahead and see if someone's saying goodbye.
All right.
Oh, two white people telling us about Black Lives Matter. So surprising. I'm sure it's going to be positive, and you're going to tell us how to improve things instead of criticizing and telling us about black on black crime, about Black people having a higher crime rate, blah, 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 blah. Please tell us how we can fix the problems.
So I don't think we talked about black on black crime in this episode. And we are about to end, but if you go back and listen to our show, we criticized BLM, and then it wasn't our major point of the episode, but we did kind of talk about what are the things that they maybe should have done or people should do instead of following BLM, the organization.
Yeah, she might not. She probably won't. But yeah, I think we'll kind of pick up with that next time. It ties right into our next episode. Our next episode, we'll be talking, like Spencer said, specifically about individual riots like Kenosha, but also some of the instances that caused them, such as the incident with Breonna Taylor or Jacob Blake, and we'll be talking about George Floyd too. These are important conversations that need to be had. So yeah, I think that's all we have left to say for today. Do you want to take this message or not? Oh, it's from Michael.
Sure, let's take it real quick, and then we can.
This goes to the lady who just left a message. See, this just shows your ignorance. My father's a Black American from South Central, and my mother's a Russian Jew. See, my father raised us to be a man, not a black man, but a man. These two gentlemen right here speak facts. Had nothing to do with this, that, and the other. You want to jump in at the end and run your little mouth? That shows your ignorance. Ignorance. Gentlemen, I always enjoy your shows. Don't let ignorance like this get to you.
Thank you
Amen.
so much. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good point.
Yeah. On that note, I said we probably wrapped it up really well today, guys. Thank you everyone for coming on today. Come in for our next show. I already said we'll be talking about some of the specific instances of the riots and what caused them. These are important conversations we had, like I said. So yeah, please tune in to next time. We'll be going on live at Saturday at 3:00, right, Spencer?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3:00
p.m.
So,
Eastern Standard Time.
Yep, Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, my name is Spencer. My name is Colson.
My name is Spencer, and we're 18 and American.
We're signing off. Everyone, thank you for coming on today. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, guys.